Networking is crucial for every business owner to grow their business, but too often we don't make time for it. Creating systems for your networking can feel like you're making it less authentic, but the opposite is true. Systematizing your networking is what makes you more genuine, personal, and even more effective for your company. On today's episode, you will learn how to systematize your networking and still engage genuinely with our guest, Dr. Ben Spears of the Brokerpreneur podcast. Hi, Dr. Ben. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited about being here. Like I said, I'm not used to being the one who's interviewed. I'm used to the one asking questions.
Well, we're happy to have you in the hot seat because we're really curious about how you help entrepreneurs, and specifically you help brokers, right? Brokers grow their business. Well, maybe I'll let you say it. So tell us about Brokerpreneur and what you all do.
Gotcha. Well, I was getting ready to just like sit back, put my hands back, let you take.
Yeah, I was like, good. I can't wait to hear this from you, Gwen. This is.
I'm like, she's done her homework here. I love it. So guys, my name is Dr. Ben Spears. Obviously, I'm one of the co-owners of Brokerpreneur podcast, and what we do is we help real estate brokerages scale their brokerages using recruiting, retention, and per person productivity. So essentially helping each agent, do a few more transactions each year.
And so today we're focused on the networking part of your job, which is really hard. So you're trying to get brokers to get the best agents on their team, which requires a lot of networking. So, and Jeremy and I, we were like kind of thinking about this before the show, and we're like, we're good. We're both social, so we're good at networking to a point, but I don't think we've systematized it. And systematizing is really what's necessary when everybody is running their own businesses, are really busy. And it's not that we don't want to reach out to people that we've met, because we we genuinely like people. So we love meeting people. We love the conversations we have. But what happens with us is that we'll have the coffee, we'll have the lunch, we'll make that last email. Oh my God, it was so great to see you. And then what? And then what? It's like it's random or happen chance.
Yeah, and the
happen chance.
I kind of like to think of systematizing something because it's in line with procedures, right? It's really, to systematize something is to make the time and to facilitate something that is important, that is worth doing, right? So, because when I first heard this, I kind of thought, well, it seems a little disingenuous to systematize the social aspect of the business thing. But if you think of it the way I just defined it, you're really just making the time for things that are important, like people, which we like to be with people. We like to hang out with people. And in our networks, we can turn that into something valuable for both sides of the conversation, right? That's kind of how I see it anyway.
So how do you systematize it?
Yeah. So, there are a lot of nails that were hit on the head there, and I'm going to touch on a couple of them. Time blocking is huge. I definitely had that mindset at one point where I was like, gosh, I'm putting this on my calendar to give Bob Berg a call. Right. And I'm like, is that really the right thing to do? Like, of course, I talk to Bob all the time, on LinkedIn. I'll send him messages and connect and that kind of thing. But, when it boils down to it, I know that he's busy. He knows that I'm busy. If at any point, and I'm definitely not telling, I'm using this as an example, of course, I'm definitely not telling him, hey, I'm time blocking, I'm going to reach out and talk to you. No one knows, right? So first of all, no one knows whether you time blocked or not. Once you sent that connection or that, hey, just how are you doing? Is there anything that I can do for you? But if you don't, it gets lost in all of the other distractions throughout the day, right? So in real estate, we from a brokerage standpoint, we call those gotta minutes, right? Where an agent hops into a broker's office and they say, "Got a minute? You got a minute for this? You got a minute for that?" And if you don't have on your calendar, whether it be one hour weekly, an hour daily, 10 minutes daily, however you want, I couldn't care less. If you don't have time in there to say, I'm going to reach out to my people, my tribe, let's say, and just make sure that, they're doing okay. And I hate using like the word, I don't hate the word, but I hate using the word authentic, real. Yes, you should be those things. You should be authentic. You should be real, but they get put into those categories of like buzzwords like funnel. Mm-hmm. Or like I built a funnel, right? Be authentic. Hustle was like a big word, a couple years ago, and it's still a good word, but it's very much overused. But if you're time blocking and you're genuinely reaching out to these people to say, look, I just really wanted to check on you. I wanted to see how things were going. How's your business? How's your family, depending on how well you know them. But then on top of that, really trying to figure out what is it that does, two things. What is it that drives this person? Right? What is it that makes them, tick? What makes them want to go to work or do whatever they do every day? And number two, what type of value can you offer those people? So in my CRM, right, I have notes for those two things. I'm looking at what drives them and what I can actually do for them. I don't have anything in those notes about what value are they worth.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Like
you
what
see that
you can do for them. And then do you also have like dog name, wife name, kids names? Like, do you keep those personal things in there too?
Yeah, depending on what we get, and I'm gifted to a certain extent. I can remember most people's names and most information about them. Notes are like you have to have them. You do get caught up in things, but I think that comes from being a genuine connector, a genuine a relationship builder.
Because you want them to feel good when you talk to them and feel seen when you talk to them. So the more you can remember, and if your brain, I don't know, I've had COVID twice. My memory is like not what it used to be. So those notes are important, but it doesn't mean that putting those notes in, people would say that's disingenuous. You don't really care about them. But it is the act of the discipline of putting it in the system is caring, so that the relationship 100%. Is stronger and they feel more seen when you talk to them again.
And I suppose the notes are just more important if you're not genuinely a person who does socialize or does reach out. Because there's got to be that end of the spectrum too. People that just are not gifted with name remembering or birthdays and things like that. So not a bad idea to have notes, just generally speaking, I suppose. I would need them to check it. I don't even remember your birthday or your dog's name. And we're married.
He's kidding.
I'm kidding.
He does know. I'm
kidding. The dog is it's a good dog.
He has a terrible name, but he's a good dog. But at any rate, okay. So you have a CRM. Which CRM do you use?
Yeah, so we use Zoho. I'm not a proponent of any particular CRM. Someone wants to use an Excel spreadsheet, by all means, use an Excel spreadsheet. If you want a lady that works with us, Tammy, she has this Lilly Pulitzer notebook they got. So it's just like her whole life's in that thing, and I'm like, whatever, use whatever you need to. You. But of course, I prefer digital over hard copy. But we use Zoho and we like it just fine. But it's definitely not a commercial for Zoho by any stretch of the imagination.
So you time block, and since you're the networking guru, how much time a week do you time block to connect with your people, your tribe?
Yeah, so I have a lot of time blocked for those things because as far as our podcast goes, Brokerpreneur Podcast, obviously, I reach out and I get those guests, right? We teach classes to brokers every single day of the week from 12 to 1, and there are guests that come on there multiple times a week. I'm the one that goes out and gets those guests, and so. That I say that because when I say, gosh, I spend hours a day networking with people, it's the easiest job in the world for me because that's what I love.
Yeah, right.
When Jeremy made a good point, like, listen, like, some people just aren't this way, or some people aren't that way, and so they need certain things, or they need certain circumstances or conditions to be able to facilitate that job. Well, I would go back and think about core values. And so think about if you're a solopreneur and you're like the only person driving the boat, then yeah, you got to do it. If you're not, and you either have someone doing it, or you're still doing it because you don't necessarily trust that relationship to someone else, gosh, that's something that needs to be addressed. If you're talking systemizing and building procedures and processes around this, you have to find that right person and put them in that right seat to really, I would say, scale your networking to the level that you want to. Everyone can connect. Everyone, can build relationships, right? We've seen that over the history of time. Almost everybody ends up, having a boyfriend or a girlfriend at some time. Almost everyone ends up, maybe getting married at some point. But a lot of it has to do with, if there's 4 personalities, let's say, most tests break down into that. You need that person who can kind of speak that language of almost anybody that they talk to.
Yeah. I kind of liken it to ADD. I have ADD, ADHD. And the mere fact that I have a hard time paying attention to things or anything doesn't mean that those things that I should be paying attention to don't have to be written down or remembered. I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't have to pay attention, or that I like finding keys. The way that you compensate is by having a system where you put your keys in one spot. So you still have to act like you can remember where your keys are just by compensating. And like in this case, if you're not a natural communicator, or you don't reach out to people naturally, well, that's where you get the system and you put it in place so that you don't forget, or you
prioritize what's important,
and helps you to prioritize, because connection is probably one of the most important things about business. I mean, one, of course, you have to have connection just to operate, but go to work, you got to like the people. Like when you go to conferences, you got to like the people. And if you know things about those people and you've kept up a relationship, you can do so much more with that person.
So, like, let's say if you are systematizing it, because you genuinely care about people, do you try to always contact them on their birthday? Like, do you have a cadence that you talk to people that are maybe in your loose network? So someone that you're not going to hang out with, like they're not coming to your house tomorrow, but you like them. You had the meeting. It was fun. You genuinely like them. Like, when are you going to touch base after that follow-up email after the coffee?
Yep. And so, we try our best as far as, birthdays and that kind of stuff goes. And yes, they go in the CRM. I don't have a lot of people's birthdays until maybe it's too late. And I see on LinkedIn that so-and-so had a birthday, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that and I'm putting CRM. I'm not going to miss it. Not going to miss it next year. But I think that goes, right back to that point of, just being just genuinely wanting to help other people. Right. So if you think as entrepreneurs, definitely property management, right? We're looking along the lines of everything must be value first, right? You have to load the box with value, because something's going to happen. Right. You know that there's a problem that's going to arise. There's going to be some kind of issue that needs a solution, and you need to already be that person that is, they know, like, and trust, to ensure that when you do reach out, they say, okay, well, I already like this person. If I don't talk to anyone, but on their birthday, they get a message from me that says happy birthday. Well, I can tell you right now that, on my birthday, like, anything social media on this, I turn it off. Yeah, because it kind of ruins your birthday, because you're like, oh my God, I have to respond to somebody I talked to 5 years ago because they wished me exactly. You get filled up with those wishes, and from a business standpoint, you get that as well. A lot of time it's somebody that you went to elementary school with, and you didn't remember that you went to elementary school with them. But from a business standpoint, you definitely get those, and you just get that feeling. You get that taste in your mouth. That's like, they're only wishing me happy birthday because I'm in their CRM.
Yeah, that's right.
And, and I've got this dollar amount, beside my name. And that's where I don't put a lot of, emphasis on those types of actions. I'll tell you what I do, right? And so, if I talk to someone, depending on the conversation that I have, I am waiting no longer than a week to talk to that person, right? If I don't get in touch with them, right, I'm probably going to reach back out in 2 or 3 days, and I'm going to ask, and I'm going to care, is everything okay, right? Are you all right? Especially if it's someone that I've talked to several times. Now, part of that is I care. Another part of that is, once someone sees that, they're going to say, all right, like, I get it, right? This person cares. Now, the first time that you do that, and they say, oh, I'm okay, I was on vacation or whatever, and you say, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that you were okay. We're running a special. It's 30%, it's 30% off, whatever. Well, you might as well just take them out of your CRM, right? That's not going to work. But from a and I'm trying to keep this into systemization, but from a systemization standpoint, yes, I put their birthdays in there 100% if I can. Everyone should get a happy birthday if they can, but it just can't be the only thing that there is. Now, as I'm going through and I'm assigning a task, I never call anyone without assigning a next task. I never text anyone. I never email anyone without assigning a next task. Jeremy, I haven't gotten anything from you yet. Right, I've gotten something from Gwen via an email about the show today. There's already a task. Gwen, I love you to death already. Right, that's my personality. Jeremy, I love you to death already. Matt, who I spoke with before the show, gosh, I just love him to death already. There's going to be a time when I want to reach out to every single one of you. Number one, make sure that I remind you that I do. But number two, I am obsessed with making sure that I add value to you, and it's genuine value. I will hardly ever ask anything of you, unless you just like, hey, I've got this person that I know you can help.
So, like, for instance, if you reach out to me and you're like, hey, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. And I don't give you a lot back, then how do you reach out again to add value to me? Like, what is the next step? Are you going to say like, hey, I read this article and I thought about you? Or what is the next step that's more proactive? Because if it's just hey, how are you doing? And I just give you something general back, it doesn't give you a lot to work with.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And maybe I was being a little bit too vague on that. So I appreciate you going into a little bit of depth there. I had a connection. We've all heard this, but the first time that I heard this was from one of my great friends when I lived in Kentucky, and his name's Michael Prather. Super guy, just giving him a shout out there, Michael Prather. And he said, don't be the most interesting person in the room, which he absolutely could be. He said, always be the most interested. So whenever I'm reaching out and maybe sending an email that has something to do with how are you doing, there's a lot more in there than how are you doing, right? I want to know how you're doing, of course. I want to know, how's the podcast going, right? I've watched a bunch of your podcasts today, so I've seen studios change and co-op, and different space and that kind of thing. I want to know how long you've been in this new space. How do you like it? Right? Hey, that's a dope hat, Jeremy. How can I get one of those? Right?
Yeah, Anacom client.
Yeah, and so
friend.
So for me, right, I'm looking for those opportunities to ask those questions for two reasons. I genuinely care. I'm obsessed already with this space, right? So when your podcast went from one space to another, and then I've seen you in like a PMM con, right? Like, doing on the spot things. I love that journey, right? I get obsessed with that journey and I say, whoa, that looks so amazing, or this sounds so amazing. What are you doing for this? What are you doing for that? I hope and pray that as someone goes along on that journey, that they're very into it as well. No one gets to 4 seasons or however many seasons that you guys have been doing your podcast without really enjoying your podcast. Well, guess what? You probably love talking about your podcast to some extent. Maybe it's like, gosh, I've done it so much, I don't want to talk about it anymore. But I have to imagine that if you're like me, it's like, I love everything podcasting. So I'm going to ask you questions about that, of things that I want to know and that I hope you want to talk about. So if I ask you that and you send me an email back with all those questions, and one of them's like, how long have you been in your space? How you like it? Is that Matt guy really as nice as he seemed? Or was he just like, moving around mics and furniture at the beginning? Right?
Okay, so you're going to ask a bunch of questions, and then through those questions, see how you can add some value. Like, oh, well, that's really interesting. I met somebody who also does a podcast, and maybe you guys could do a season together. So through the inquiring and the genuine interest in what they're doing, then you're seeing how you can add value in that way.
Yes, correct.
I wonder.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to I want to turn it on its head a little bit, because one thing about connection is you get to know people, right? Obviously. Mm-hmm. And what happens in those instances when you meet somebody and you genuinely determine that you don't like them or that they're not a values fit? So for instance, we were at one of these conferences years ago, and we were talking to a guy, and he was explaining to me how you can legally rip people off with a real estate license.
Nice.
That guy.
Well, I mean, you're not going to connect with him.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, so the nice thing about connecting with people is also you get to know who you don't need to network with, or who, when you do work on your networking, they're not included in it. I wouldn't put that guy in my database unless it had a big red mark on it. But my question, I guess, where I was going with that is, how do you determine whether or not that's somebody that you think is worth connecting, and how do you filter them out of your universe? Just by not.
You do that. You do that. I would say that's probably the easiest thing to do, right? So we'll continue using that previous example. Of course, if someone says, "Hey, this is how you rip people off with your real estate license," like they're never making it into the database. But in a little bit more of a different standpoint, if I connect with Gwen, right? And she's, sent me an email, and I'm saying, hey, how you doing? Like, how do you like your new space and that kind of thing? And she says, all good. Right. Now that could be a few things, right? Maybe she's having a tough day. A lot of times it's not, most of the time I would say, with everybody out there trying to network, it's not you. Right. There's something going on. If somebody's, short with you.
She's still married to Jeremy.
Yeah. She obviously has issues. Right. So when it comes to that, they're kind of telling you like, hey, this just isn't the right time. Now, only when Gwen tells me, I don't know what I'm allowed to say on your show.
You can say what you want. Yeah.
only when she's like, hey, fuck off.
Yeah,
I'm like,
fuck off.
I'm out. Right. That, to me, I'm marking that hard no. Doesn't want to know me. Doesn't want to whatever. See you later. But if she says all good, well, I'm not. I'm starting to think, right, and that's from my days maybe as a doctor, like as a caregiver. I'm starting to. Well, I hope everything's okay. I'm not sending her that saying, hey, hope everything's okay, right? But I'm thinking that. I'm putting that in my notes, and I'm saying, hey, follow up with her maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in a month. And remember this. I'm saying, she was a little bit short. Maybe something's going on. And I'm not saying like tiptoe, but I am saying make sure that she knows, right? Like that you care about that. Mm-hmm. And so notes are everything, right? Like a CRM is useless if you don't use it, and the best one is the one you will use, right? We've heard all those right. We've heard all those little quips, but as far as getting someone out of my database, gosh, it is when someone says like, hell no, I don't contact me again, I don't love it, but I love it.
Yeah.
Right. Because if I'm
helps filter.
Respect your time.
Yeah, right. I need to refine that to the people who actually want to connect with me. And it doesn't mean that I can't, still try and add value to that person. Right. Like they're in my brain. They've rented that space for a little bit. So I'm still thinking, well, if something comes across, what can I do for that? What can I do for that person? But really it's refining that, and you get this core group of people, and I got a list of them that I could just like ramble off the top of my head, that if I needed a podcast guest for the next 6 months, I could say Frank Agan, right? He's the owner of AM Spirit. Frank Agan, I need some podcast guests, man. And homie is just gonna like send me an email within 10 minutes, and it's gonna be like, here's 18 people that I know. And so, that's those are the people that it's like, okay, they match, right? They're
right.
He and I are a cultural fit. We have similar core values. It's all about value. And Frank never asks for anything in return. It is just, here it is. If you ask, and you shall receive.
So, okay. So you have your CRM, you ask questions, you genuinely are interested in people. When you ask them their questions about them, you're trying to think of ways that you can add value. And then you're touching them in terms of contact very frequently. And then what do you have parties? Like, do you have big events where you reconnect with people if they've been super busy for a few months? Or what are some of the other tactics that you use? Do you use the thank you note, handwritten notes?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and this gets a little bit more into that process, that we're getting to, right? The first part of this was all about, being genuine, connecting, and that kind of thing. We have a proprietary process. I don't know if I can call that word, the 552, right? So our 552, helps brokers reach out with, and they can do this daily, weekly, whatever. Anyone can use this. And they reach out to 5 cold people. They reach out to 5 warm people, or hot people, however you want to say. And then 2 handwritten cards from that list. And through our system, we have all of this laid out. We have forms based around our 552. We have, not templates, but guidelines that of how to write the perfect card, how to write it in a sense of there are 4 personality types. You got to touch on each one of them, because you don't necessarily always know who's on the other side of that card. And if you only talk about numbers and you get someone who's, just an amiable, right, they're just not going to care. But you get that analytical person, man, it's the greatest card ever. Right. So there are systems like that, but it all stems from, knowing people, connecting and because you can be fake.
Yeah.
There's two ways to be remembered when it comes to networking. Number 1 is to be authentic. And number 2 is to be fake. Right. How many times
sniff that out?
Yeah, people can sniff that out so fast it's not even funny. And if I ever got a card from you guys, right, I can just tell talking to you that you are who you are. Right, we've been joking from the second that I've been on the podcast, and right, it's like, okay, if I got something from you, I'm going to open that, and I'm already going to assume that you meant it. So if I'm doing the same thing and I have a process of 552 where, I'm doing my 5 cold, my 5 warm, my 2 handwritten cards. If someone knows that you are who you are, they're going to be more open to receiving that. Now, getting to your point of, do you have events and do you do these things? When I first got in, when I left chiropractic, let's go back even more in time. When I was 2, no, I'm joking. But when I started my chiropractic practice, I had a mentor who said, always have something to invite someone to.
Huh.
And I was like, okay, that's really cool. So I started doing these classes of, having a healthy pregnancy, or, what vitamins are the best vitamins to take, and how can you tell what's good on the shelf and what's bad on the shelf, and all these different things. Super cool classes that I love teaching, but I even more love them because other people wanted to learn that information, and it got them into my practice so that I could say, hey, here's the info, and also this is what I do. Now, when I got into real estate, once we moved from Kentucky to Florida, and that's a long story that I'll make short. My wife got her dream job. We moved to Florida. I had 6 months to kill. I got my real estate license. Right. So that's how I got into real estate. That first year, I just fell in love with it. Right. And I closed like 30 transactions. And I was like, why in the world would I go and do this? I had no sphere of influence whatsoever. I didn't even know a dog's name, right? You guys know your dog. I didn't know a dog's name down here in Florida. And, but I said, I can't really teach a class on real estate. Like, I don't have a tremendous amount of experience here. Like, I know what I was taught from a testing standpoint and through the education of a broker. But I said, what else can I do to meet people? And so I said, I'm going to do a podcast with a friend. Right. And so we started this podcast called the Tampa Rundown, and I went to I went to Google, and I printed off a list of 100 most influential business people in Tampa. And I take that list, and then I go to Instagram, right? And I skipped a step there. I say, you want to be on a show? You want to be on a show? You want to be on a show? And we got some no's, we got some yeses, and I ended up, talking to a lot of people here that I had no business talking to at the time. But that's a system, right? There was, and I want to highlight that there was a system behind that. But ultimately, to your question, yes, I had something to invite someone to. Now, our clients, this is feeding into that 552. I told you we do classes every single day from 12 to 1. Well, one of those classes is for agents only. And it is something that we produce. We do all the clips, we do all the edits, we do all the everything. But our broker clients can invite agents to that, and it adds value. So our clients always have something of tremendous value. We have amazing guests on all the time that they have something to invite people to, and that's part of that 552. But it's difficult because you guys know how it is, right? It's hard to put on an event. It's difficult, just even the process of doing a podcast, takes some setup and takes, some effort, right? It takes time out of your day. So, we house those things and build those things and manage them for them, but so that they can always have something to invite someone to.
That's like cool. That. I like that one too. Now I'm thinking, I don't have anything on my damn list to invite people to. We need to have a party. Yeah.
But okay, so this is really interesting and good information just to remind people to use a CRM, to invite people to things, to reach out and connect, to block some time off. Do you have a story of like the best networker you've ever met? And maybe something unusual or interesting that they did in order to add value, or that just made you go, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And so, when I first got started, I got two stories I'm going to share, and I'll make them both quick. The best networker I know is Bob Berg. He's the author of The Go-Giver, a national best-selling, author and book. I don't know how many millions of copies or whatever have been sold of that, but she's a great friend of mine, and simply starting a podcast that maybe we were getting, 10 downloads a month or something crazy from. I reach out to Bob and I say, Bob, and it was like this crazy name. It was like the Sexy Real Estate Recruiting Podcast or something like that, right? Like, it was just horrible. We didn't know what to name it. And I said, man, it's got to be something sexy. And I was like, okay, let's just do that. And then it turned into, Brokerpreneur Podcast. But I reach out to Bob, and who's super well known. And I'm like, hey, I got a podcast. It's called the Sexy Real Estate Recruiting Podcast. I'd love to have you on. Immediately in my mind, I'm thinking like, this guy ain't coming on this show. And he just said, I'd love to. Right. So I bring that up for two reasons. Number one is, gosh, just him doing that was enough to make my day. You're really looking like, how can you make someone's day? He didn't have to go, do something absolutely outlandish. Sometimes we think we got to send someone like a giant fruit basket or something, or a box of cookies and all these kind of things to make an impression. Whereas really genuinely saying like, man, like, what is it that I can do for you? And I talk to Bob, gosh, at least once a week. And I'm always like, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? Not one time has he ever said, here's something that you can do. He knows if I find out something I can do, I'm going to do it. Right. So yeah, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But that's the mark. If you haven't read that book, that's the mark of a true connector. Is he's always saying, yes, absolutely, I'll help in any way that I can. And number two, is there anything else that I can do? Right? He came on the show. He's like, I love coming on the show. I'll come on again if you want me to. Is there anything else? Bob, we're having a speaker. Right. We're having an event that's called Elevate, I think was the one that we were doing at the time. We're having an event called Elevate, and I don't have a speaker, and it's like a month away. What in the world can we do? You know what? I got this guy. His name's Frank Agan, and I'm going to get you guys connected. All right. And then so on. Then Frank Agan connects me with 1 million people, and so on and so on and so on. But the biggest thing that he did was he was who he was who he is, I guess what I was saying.
Yeah.
And it was who he is. And he genuinely just wanted to connect, and he genuinely just wanted to add value. And even though, he's, I don't know exactly where he lives, but even though he's like where he is and he's, touring the world speaking, he still was able to take the time, come down to the Sexy Real Estate Recruiting Podcast and say, yeah, I'll give you guys 30 minutes. I'll give you an hour. Without even the slightest hesitation. Now, my second story about this is when I started another company. I was with Berkshire Hathaway at the time, and still hang my license there. Well, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway came and did this like mastery event, and I was like, man, I love this. This is killer, right? I got to meet this guy. And as soon as he gets done finishing, he walks out, and I'm like walking out like right on his heels, and he goes in the restroom. I'm like, okay, I'm not going in. I'm not going in there. I'm not.
I like to be that guy.
Right. But as soon as he comes out, I'm like, hey, I want to let you know, like, I loved what you did. I love what you were saying. And I wanted to shake your hand. I just started a business at the time, a separate company from real estate. I would love, if I could just have a few minutes of your time to maybe just do like a mentor call or whatever. Well, the guy was like immediately, yes, absolutely. Here's my assistant's name, call her, email her, whatever, get it set up. And I talked to him every single month. Every single month we had a call from that point on. And he's way too busy to talk to me, but he wasn't. Yeah. And so the power, I'll bring that up because the power of networking is really all about adding value and then knowing what you want out of it. Mm-hmm. Right. Because it's like, who knows what, I would have done. And there were so many people that are like, what, you're going to talk to this guy? You're going to do these things? And I'm like, yeah, I just had to have the guts to ask. Mm-hmm. Most successful people, right? You guys are ultra successful. If I ask you for something, man, you're going to try and do it. I genuinely believe that you're going to try and help me out, right? If I truly need it, and you can tell. And I think that's a key characteristic that a lot of successful people get put in this little envelope of, man, they're just jerks, or they're all about themselves, or they're selfish or whatever. I've never met anyone that's ultra successful that wasn't trying their best to help everyone else that they come in contact with. So think about that from your networking standpoint. You're out there and you're just trying to like, how can I add value? What kind of guests could I get for Gwen and Jeremy? What other kind of things can I do? And I'm going to try and find out, right? If you guys let me. And then I set those up for you, right? Something great is going to happen, and it could happen to you. It could happen to me. Who knows what it is? But man, if I could just be part of that win, then that's like the ultimate high.
So was the president of Berkshire Hathaway? Was that Warren Buffett? No, it was. It's to be clear, it's Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate. That wasn't Vince Lisi, was it? He's a speaker.
No, this was Chris Stewart at the time. He's now the president of Place.
Awesome. Well,
Super awesome guy. Can't say enough about him.
Well, we are so excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for helping us deconstruct networking and figure out a system that will work for us and for the listeners on how to network more effectively. So thank you, Dr. Ben Spears, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We'll be chatting soon, no doubt. We'll see ya.
I hope so.